In other words, be more Beyonce and less Kanye. What I mean by that is Beyonce always makes sure to get the credit for the hard work that she puts in. But have you ever seen her come across in a manner that you would define as arrogant? I haven't, but you can let me know in the comments. On the other hand, Kanye labels himself a fashion genius without having the evidence or the proof to back that label. That is arrogance. That is an inflated sense of self. So I was checking out the Holistic Psychologist podcast. And if you haven't heard of her yet, her name is Nicole Pera, and she is a psychologist who helps people to do their own self-healing work. And in that episode, she said something that really stood out to me. I am just going to paraphrase it here, but what she basically said was, I feared standing in my power because I was fully aware of how standing in my power would make other people feel. And this really stood out to me because this is something before doing my own healing work that I would have really related with. And you can let me know if you also can relate to that quote. So again, the quote was, I feared standing in my power because I was fully aware of how standing in my power would make other people feel. So we all chose a life strategy when we were kids. And this life strategy was basically our answer to what role should I play in order to stay safe through this life. Now, this humble and people-pleasing life strategy that you chose as a kid might have served you well then, but remember, kids have very limited life experiences. So when we're kids, being nice just means good person. Being mean just means bad person. But adults are much more complex than that. So although your humble and people-pleasing life strategy may have served you well as a kid to help you make friends or maybe be your teacher's favorite, it might not be serving you well as an adult, and it might be counterproductive to helping you to reach the goals and get the things that you desire most. So as adults, we may have chosen to shrink ourselves because if I shrink myself, I won't threaten others and I will be safe. And these are the people that as adults, we might define as that she or he is a very humble person. For some people, being called humble might be a good thing. And for others, being called humble just might not feel so good. Something about that word just may not sit right with you. And sometimes what makes that difference between whether you like a label or dislike a label might just be what your natural innate temperament might have been. So things that feel good to us tend to give us energy. Those are the ways that we can realize that this is who I truly am. Versus the things that drain us are the things that are not innate to who we truly are. So step one is to ask yourself, am I humble or is it trauma? Is it that you are innately humble and when you're called humble, you feel good? Or is it that your childhood experiences programmed you to put on a mask of humility? Number two, even though being called humble may not feel so good, it's important to remember that humility is a strength. But in our culture, if humility is one of your strengths, it's also important to be assertive. Not aggressive, but assertive. Because unfortunately, people that are very humble and lack assertiveness tend to become invisible in our culture. And this can make it very difficult for us to get the things that we desire most. That might be a relationship, that might be a promotion. But again, here it's just important that if humility is one of your strengths, to also make sure that you work on your level of assertiveness. So let's define humility. So the VIA Institute are researchers that have studied character traits for decades, and they define humility as 1, letting your accomplishments speak for themselves, and 2, not regarding yourself as being more special than one is. This is the interesting thing though. If you are shrinking yourself and playing small, you are not practicing authentic humility. You are unknowingly playing a humble role in order to feel safe and to be liked by your circle. So there are 2 parts to authentic humility. Number 1, letting your accomplishments speak for themselves. And number two, not regarding yourself as being more special than you really are. So with that definition, it also says not regarding yourself to be more special than you really are. So is it genuine, authentic humility if you are regarding yourself to be less special than you actually are? So a workable definition for authentic humility is I advocate for the credit I deserve, the credit that I've worked for, no more, no less. And I do not try to minimize the credit that others deserve. So the author Brandy Lynn Tebow put it beautifully when she said, "You've been fooling yourself into thinking there is something wrong with you so that you can keep playing small. Be very clear. Believing in your inadequacy is not humble. It is deluded. It is not doing right by anyone to think that you are not good enough. It is not helping you to be a better person. It is only having you work fruitlessly to compensate for an inadequacy that doesn't exist." So let's go back to the first part of the definition of authentic humility. Letting your accomplishments speak for themselves. But can your accomplishments, can your skills, can your talents, can your strengths speak for themselves if no one knows about them? So let's imagine for a second that Christopher Nolan or Issa Rae said, "Don't put my name in the credits, let the work speak for itself." Would you label that to be humble, or would that be highly unrealistic? So my point here is to say that if you have dreams or goals that you want to attain, you have to become comfortable with taking the credit that you deserve. So let's say you're in, let's say a meeting at work, and the meeting is about solving a problem that everyone is having. And you know exactly how to solve the problem, but you don't speak up. Now you might think that in that moment you are being humble. But if you are shrinking yourself, what you're actually doing is you're coming from a place of fear. And true humility comes from confidence. So if I'm confident I know how to solve this problem, I'm comfortable displaying my problem-solving abilities in front of the group. And this is what authentic humility is. So many of us fear talking about ourselves because we don't want to come across as arrogant to other people. But it's important to remember that arrogance is an inflated sense of self. And if you remember that definition of humility again, in the second part of that definition, it says, not regarding yourself as more special than you actually are. So if you are asking for the credit that you deserve, you are not regarding yourself to be more special than you actually are. You are just allowing others to see you for who you truly are. And this is true humility. So again, arrogance is an inflated sense of self, okay? And humility is taking the credit that you deserve without the inflated sense of self. So in other words, be more Beyonce and less Kanye. What I mean by that is Beyonce always makes sure to get the credit for the hard work that she puts in. But have you ever seen her come across in a manner that you would define as arrogant? I haven't, but you can let me know in the comments. On the other hand, Kanye labels himself a fashion genius without having the evidence or the proof to back that label. That is arrogance. That is an inflated sense of self. So what can we do to practice humility and still stand in our power? So there's a very simple way of doing this. So if you have evidence to back your words, speak up. That's a part of the definition of humility, letting your accomplishments speak for themselves. Don't shrink. Don't try and take away credit from yourself, or don't try and take credit for work that is not yours. So remember, no one can give you credit for your accomplishments or for your work if no one knows that that work is even yours. Now, if you do not have the evidence to back your words, that would be more so arrogance and an inflated sense of self. Humble people do not try to minimize and insult and take away from the strengths of other people. Arrogant people do that. It's arrogant people that want you to see them as bigger and better than they actually are. But humble people are just comfortable in saying, this is who I am. These are what my strengths are. These are what my talents are. These are what my skills are. And I deserve to get the credit for them. So let's go back to that quote again. I feared standing in my power because I was fully aware of how standing in my power would make other people feel. Remember, people will talk whether you shrink and play small or whether you stand in your power. Have you ever heard anyone say, she's too nice as a justification for not liking someone? So let's say you're in an interaction with someone and you're being super nice, super kind, and you feel like you're coming across as the most humble person that ever existed. But let's say that person that you're interacting with had a friend in middle school or high school that was very nice to her face, but ended up stabbing her behind her back. In that interaction with her, you might unknowingly be reminding her of that friend that she had that was very nice to her face, but stabbed her behind her back. So I say this to illustrate that no matter what you do, there will always be people that do not like you. There will always be people who will find justifications for why you are not a likable person, no matter how humble you try to make yourself out to appear to be. No matter how small you play, no matter how much you try to shrink yourself, no matter how humble you are, there may still be people who do not like you. We do not have control over the feelings of other people. The only person whose feelings you are responsible for are your own. So whether you shrink and play small and people please, or you stand firm in your power, there will still be people that do not like you. So you might as well stand tall. I hope you found this information to be helpful. Let me know in the comments and remember to like and subscribe. Thank you.